Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I'm back with a quick little follow-up video based on all of this Sony and PlayStation news that has come out in the last day or so. Now, I'm sure many of you have seen this, but basically Sony has apologized. They actually apologized, saying they messed up, that they didn't really gauge just how much interest there was in people wanting to go back and get digital games off of the PlayStation 3 store and also the Vita. And so they have decided to change their mind. This is wild. I never saw this coming, but they basically are going to keep up the PlayStation 3 store and the Vita store. Now they are going to let the PSP store go away, which isn't too surprising. I think we all kind of saw that coming, but it's pretty cool that they're going to keep the PS3 and the Vita store alive. Now, I wanted to do this video because while I'm very happy to see that this is happening and that Sony has listened to us, I do believe that there is more that can be done. And this is my video to kind of talk about that. And the first one being, of course, is that, well, you know, the stores are going to be up for now, but as of the making of this video, there's no indication as to when they will eventually go away. And they will go away. Every one of these stores costs money and server time, and you have to pay admins to keep them going, and eventually they just kind of run their course, and so they will eventually go away, and I guess that's kind of inevitable. But the thing is that I believe, and I think a lot of you who watch my channel believe, that video games are worth preserving. And that's the whole reason why we are talking about this lately, because, you know, to go and buy some of my favorite PlayStation 1 games or PlayStation 3 games or Vita games, if you're to try to get them physically, they are often very expensive. And to have a digital version that people can go to and get for a fraction of the price and play them, because that's what this is all about, to play these games, well, that's a good thing, and it keeps these games alive. I feel like these games are worth preserving, and so that's why we're having this discussion. And as a side note to that, I find it kind of interesting that we have to even have this conversation with Sony at all. Because if you take a step back and look at Sony as a big corporation, well, they don't just make video games, they make movies, they make music, and they have deep catalogs in both. And they continue to provide access to those things. For instance, I don't know if you know this, but Alice in Chains, Prince, AC/DC are all part of Sony Music. You know, when it comes to movies, of course, they're very popular. They own Spider-Man. They released James Bond Skyfall. They own Terminator 2. Now, can you imagine if Sony put out a press release saying, hey, guess what, guys? We're going to take away the access to those classic Alice in Chains or AC/DC albums. Of course they wouldn't do that. Now, I know it's not exactly the same thing when talking about video games, but to us, to the fans, to the people who are passionate about playing games and, you know, collecting them, it is very similar. Now, I know technically it's more complex than that, because obviously you are talking about having to keep a console alive that can play a game. And so it's a little bit different than obviously music or movies, which have a little bit more standard formats. But isn't it kind of the same? Could you imagine the rage that would happen if they just said, sorry, Terminator 2 is going to be taken away forever. You know, no more classic Prince albums. I hope you liked listening to Purple Rain, but nah, it's not going to be available after a couple months. Of course it would be. It'd be on all the different, you know, news channels and organizations. People would be throwing a fit. And I think that's what you've seen here with gamers like us. We are passionate about games. We don't care if they're old, because we still love them just as much as the day we played them. And so that's where a lot of this passion's coming from. And so as of right now, they've said that these two stores will be up. And that's great. But again, they will eventually go away. It may be 6 months from now, maybe a year, maybe 2 years from now. We don't know. But at least it gives people some time to maybe jump, you know, and get those games that they want to, or figure out some other way of getting access to them. But with that said, Sony does need to update the store to work better, because right now it barely works on PlayStation 3 and on Vita. Often you would just get broken thumbnails, you know, if anything came up at all. And so if they're going to keep it up and they want people to be able to buy digital games, it would be nice if they just would put a little bit of development in there to make it work better. I was never able to actually add money to my PlayStation wallet on the PlayStation 3. It would give me an error every time I did it. So I had to actually go to my PlayStation 4, add the funds to the wallet there, which is buried in a bunch of different menus and stuff, and then go back to my PS3 to be able to buy games. Come on, that's just a pain in the butt. Nobody is going to want to have to go through that. And so if they're going to keep it up, it would be nice if they would put a little bit of development work into making those better. And then let's also talk about the battery issue. Now, it was really interesting because when this came out about the store, a couple days later, it seemed like, or maybe a week or so after that, the news came out that, hey, guess what? The PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 4, and the PlayStation 5 may have an issue where if the internal Cmos battery dies, which it will eventually, guess what? You may not be able to use your digital games, and I guess on the PlayStation 4, I believe, you won't even be able to use your PlayStation or your physical games if that battery dies, which was a big shock to a lot of people. So now, there's a lot of information out there, but basically what it looks like is that, you know, your console and pretty much every computer has a CMOS battery in there that basically tells time, and eventually that will die. Now, to replace it, you usually have to crack it open, you void the warranty. For me, I would just take it over to Pink Gorilla and they would replace the battery. No problem, right? Except for when you do that, then it has to connect to the PlayStation Network to then, I guess, re-authenticate all of your games. And in the case of the PlayStation 4, even your physical games. Well, guess what? If the PlayStation Network goes down and the support is ended for that console in the future, that's a real problem. That basically means that the console may not work. Now, that is a huge problem, and thankfully that's gotten a lot of attention in, you know, in social media and stuff like that. And as of the making of this video, Sony has said that they are looking into it. As of the making of this video, they have not confirmed that they are going to patch it out, but they need to do that. What I would like to see happen is not just Sony, but every console maker at end of life release a final firmware for that console to basically not make it do that. When the console is at its end of life and they are no longer concerned about making money off of selling games or anything like that, there needs to be a final firmware that comes out from them to allow people to continue to play games on it. That just seems logical to me. You know, as a game collector, as someone who's been collecting games for 40 years now, you know, that's what we want, that's what we expect. And so I would like to see Sony do that for the PS3, at the PS4 when it gets to end of its life, stuff like that. You know, also make sure and take a look at the Vita and make sure that there's nothing similar to that. I don't think that there is. But make sure that any console that is at its end of life, to free it up to allow it to be played after the battery dies and after you end support of the PlayStation Network. And while we're talking about the Vita, one thing I would really like to see happen is, I'm laughing because it's so obvious, but you know, I feel like it has to be said, that Sony should release an update, a firmware update for the Vita to support standard SD cards. Now, specifically, I just picked up recently, because someone told me about it, this SD to Vita adapter that you can get that will allow you to use a micro SD card on your Vita if you have hacked it, okay? Now, we're not going to get into the details of how to do that here. There are plenty of videos that talk about that. But really the important thing here is that if you are going to make the Vita store available longer so people can get digital versions of games for longer periods of time, that means that they're going to need they're going to need more storage. And I ran into this myself, is that, you know, those proprietary Vita memory cards are stupid expensive if you can even find them. So it would be great if Sony would just do something for the fans of the Vita, basically release a firmware to support standard SD cards in that handheld. I guarantee you that if they did that, it would turn into more sales of digital games. I know that to be the case because you wouldn't have to sit there deleting off stuff to make room. You would just make it so much more pleasant of an experience. I mean, you know, Sony should have did this years ago, but now's the time. Now's the time. And then finally, my last wish. Well, I don't know if it's my last one, but it's the last one for this video. I wish Sony would start running some fire sales on those digital games on the PlayStation 3 and the Vita. Because when I was going back and looking at some of those prices, you know, you're talking on some of those games like it's retail or more. It's kind of shocking how some of those games have been out on digital for years, and yet it doesn't look like there is a sale at all. It would just be really nice. It'd be a nice gesture for fans. It'd get people excited for buying some of these games, to run some fire sales on both of those stores. That just, again, it would just be a really nice thing to do. I think that they would get a lot of positive response from that. Not only Sony, but also these developers that have continued to support, especially the Vita, all these indie developers. That would be awesome to see. I think a lot of people would just jump all over it. I know I personally would as well. So anyways, guys, that is my quick response to all of this Sony news that has happened over the last couple of weeks. And as you can tell, I'm fired up about it. I love both of these systems, and you guys know that I love preserving games. They're an art form, and while I prefer to preserve them physically, but I also see the value in digital as well. All I really want is for these games to be out there for years and years, decades to come, because all the passion that these developers put into making them, even the bad ones. I'm not even talking about the great ones, you know what I mean? I'm talking about those mediocre games, man. Like, those need to be preserved and played for generations. And so, yeah, that's how I feel about this. But love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.